I'd like to call the Tuesday morning, September 5th study session to order, 8:04 a.m. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Leitner? Here. Commissioner Walls? Here. Commissioner Rice?
Here.
Commissioner Duckham? Commissioner Tompkins? Commissioner Mahoney?
Here.
Commissioner Plotchek? Commissioner Elwell?
Here.
Chairman Shotwell?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. It's your first opportunity for public comment. Seeing none. Human Resources Non-Union Healthcare Proposal. Administrator Overton.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. You have before you a recommended medical plan options for the non-union staff effective January 1/18. It is a unique opportunity with the combination of Health Alliance Plan, Jackson Health Network, and the Henry Ford Allegiance. We looked at several options going into the renewals with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We were faced with a 9.5% projected increase. So with that, we've been looking at several options since earlier on in the year. This is a unique opportunity for the area to come together from a health provider standpoint. We do have two options for our employees, both an HMO, which is with HAP and Jackson Health Network and Henry Ford Allegiance, and a PPO with the same. So they have the same options they have now. The benefits are different, but they represent a change for Jackson County and savings. It does avoid that 9.5% increase that we were faced with that would have added to Jackson County's challenge. So with that said, what I'd like to do is ask Greg Sermont to come up. He's our broker consultant with MMA, and he'll take you through a brief overview of what we've come up with for January 18 for non-union employees. Greg?
Good morning.
We're all set.
Master.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to take a few minutes to re-summarize the proposal that's been submitted by Health Alliance Plan in cooperation with Jackson Health Network, Legion's Health, and Henry Ford Medical Group for insurance for the active employees of the county and JDOT. As things stand today, we're under the current Blue Cross Blue Shield self-funded program. We're looking at a forecasted increase for 2018 of 6.6% for the active population. It's equivalent to about $484,000 annually of cost. That number is substantially larger on the pre-65 retiree side at a little over $500,000, 20.1%. We're not addressing that piece today, of course. We'll remain focused on the active population. The experience in the last month or two for the active group under the self-funded program has worsened a bit. When we were originally together some weeks back, we reviewed a set of numbers. Since that time, the forecast of increase in cost has worsened. We're looking now at an additional $57,000 of added liability projected into 2018. So as we look at the current plan, self-funded through the Blues, we're running about $17,218 per employee annually today, forecasted to increase that 6.6% to $18,354 into 2018. Good news, bad news. The Cadillac tax, of course, is still looming out there in 2020. At this point, the way we are trending for the Blue Cross self-funded plan, and certainly for the HAP recommended program, we are not currently on track to trigger for the active segment of the population here at the county and JDOT. To remind everybody, that Cadillac tax is a 40% excise tax on excess costs in excess of stated dollar thresholds, both single and family, as stated here. So the county does have options. One, of course, is simply to renew with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, remain self-funded, assume liability for those expenses into 18 and beyond, and potentially modify the plan design or the contribution approach to make sure that the county satisfies the budgetary requirements that it has established. That would be a rather substantial cost shift to members of the county. We'll review that quickly. And of course, today, as has been the case now for a number of years, the county's adopted the 80-20 approach to that premium cost sharing. There's always the option as well to shift that to the hard cap approach, which does generate substantial additional contribution revenue to the county. We'll review that in a moment. So the forecasted increase, if we do nothing with the active segment, is about $483,000 a year. As we look at the HAP proposal for insurance, that has the propensity to generate about $527,000 of savings for next year. So savings in excess of the forecasted increase. Now, to forego that opportunity and simply massage or change the Blue Cross plan design, as I mentioned before, would require a fairly dramatic change in plan, would require a movement to a $1,000 deductible per person. Today, the deductible on the enhanced plan is $0, as well as higher out-of-pocket limits through coinsurance and copayments compared to the current plan. We'll review that in detail in a moment. By contrast, moving to HAP under a fully insured arrangement, so all of the risk would be transferred to HAP and to Jackson Health Network, with a 3-year commitment to cap costs. So this would be a worst-case scenario should experience degrade or become significantly worse than it is today. But that does shift 100% of the risk, and we're proposing under this insured arrangement 2 options, one being an HMO, which takes advantage of the local health system here in the Jackson area. The other being a PPO, or Preferred Provider Organization, which provides local, regional, and national coverage very similar to the way the plan operates today. Just to focus on the high-level financials for a moment, you see here the 2017 and 2018 forecasted costs, running $7.334 million today, with a 6.6% lift to $7.8 million for 2018, and then trended out 2 additional years at plus 8% normative trend assumed each year, compared to the HAP first-year premium cost of $7.291 million, with indexing out 2 additional years at the rate cap that's been proposed. So it's an 11% cap in year 2, 8% cap in year 3. You see the net effect of those caps in 19 and 2020. But then at the very bottom, you see the cumulative savings, year 1, year 2, year 3, under that rate cap, fully insured arrangement with HAP, relative to the forecasted 3-year cost of Blue Cross Blue Shield. As we look to the HAP program, what we're striving to attain, similar today, is uniformity of design. So a single HMO option across the entire organization, available to both represented and non-represented employees. That would be a very high-value, lower contribution program, as well as a CDHP or high deductible health plan coupled with a health savings account, very similar to the program that's in existence today. The idea here is under the 3-year fully insured approach, working in partnership with HAP and JHN, Allegiance, this would provide predictable 3 years of costs, not only from a county perspective, but also from a member or employee perspective, as they look out, for example, under a new collective bargaining agreement, they would know exactly what the worst case scenario is over that 3-year period, if in fact the new CBAs are 3-year contracts. Now the 80-20 approach today is proposed to continue into the next contract, but should the county pursue the hard cap approach, it generates another $457,000 of employee contribution revenue back into the plan. So it's a very significant number. There are a number of things we won't get into in any detail today, but they're worth noting because they derive or have the potential to derive significant value and efficiency in this new program that's been proposed. For example, the premium cost does include data warehousing, data analytics capabilities, electronic medical records, e-visits or telemed services, a high level of transparency in terms of cost and quality to the member, the engagement of clinical resources to help people navigate through the complexities of the healthcare system and make good informed decisions for their own care. And from a county perspective, this is a unilateral arrangement, so it's a 3-year commitment on the part of HAP. However, should the county determine after a year or 2 or 3 that it wishes to exit the arrangement and revert to self-insurance or migrate to some other form of health care for county and JDOT employees, the county is free to do that. As mentioned before, to remain with Blue Cross Blue Shield under a self-funded program would require, in order to hit the savings target, a substantial adjustment in plan design. To the left side, you see the HBI, Healthy Blue Incentive Enhanced Plan, which the majority of county employees are in currently, versus the Simply Blue 1,000 deductible plan, which is the plan that would be proposed to generate the savings necessary going into 18. So it's a $1,000 deductible per person with an additional 20% member copay or coinsurance until their out-of-pocket limit in total reached $6,350 or $12,007 for a single and family respectively in the calendar year. So it's a substantial increase relative to the current $600 single and $1,200 family out-of-pocket that they currently have. That plan design would generate about $1.18 million in savings. By contrast, we have here sketched out on the left side the Healthy Blue incentive, both enhanced and standard plan designs. Keep in mind the very large majority of individuals are enrolled currently in the enhanced benefit level, so they have no deductible today, very little in the way of significant cost share. Compared and contrasted with the HAP HMO, we're calling this option 2, and we've sketched out Tier 1 and Tier 2, and I'll explain that in more detail in just a moment. But the top tier of the network is the local HMO through Jackson Health Network and Allegiance and the Henry Ford Medical Group. So the network does stretch into southeastern Michigan. All hospitals in the state, save for one that's not in this area, do participate in the arrangement. That carries a $250 annual deductible per person, after which facility-based care is covered at 100%. The out-of-pocket limit is set at $4,000 per person per year, although with the copays that are established for the plan for office services, professional services, and scripts, it's actually fairly unlikely anybody would ever really hit that out-of-pocket limit, but it's in place as a protection for the plan. The second tier of the network, what we'll call Tier 2, encompasses the local HMO through Jackson Health Network and Allegiance Health and Henry Ford Medical Group, but also the broader commercial HMO HAP network in its broadest form. So the highest benefit level of coverage, is available in that top tier, but there's still coverage available should they go out of the top tier and the member seek care in Tier 2. Because it's an HMO, there is no out-of-network coverage except in the case of emergency care. The recommended replacement plan for the current high deductible plan that exists through Blue Cross, which has a health savings account component to it, is a high deductible plan with a health savings account, but insured through HAP. This does have a slightly higher deductible annually. Also includes member coinsurance after the deductible of 20% until their out-of-pocket limit hits $3,000 per person in a calendar year. So this program is designed, obviously, as a lower value option, more affordable to the member in terms of premium contribution, but for those willing to take a little bit of risk, like today, it also affords them the opportunity to invest money in a pre-tax, tax-sheltered health savings account for future use. The structure of the network for the HMO, again, is multi-tiered. The highest benefit level, the $250 deductible, is available within the smaller circle, the Henry Ford Allegiance Health, in combination with Jackson Health Network and the Henry Ford Medical Group. That's considered Tier 1. That's wrapped by the HAP Commercial HMO Network, which is also considered in-network, but it carries with it a higher level of member cost share with a $1,000 deductible. And then, of course, there's out-of-network. By contrast, the PPO network works exactly the way it does today. The network itself is the Alliance PPO network, which is owned by HAP. So that encompasses Jackson Health Network, Henry Ford Medical Group. But that's wrapped and supplemented regionally and nationally by two networks, one being Cigna and the other being MultiPlan, which is a very large national network. There are out-of-network benefits available in the PPO, just like today, but the level of cost share to the member, is substantially greater than what it is in-network, just like today. In both cases, there's no primary care physician referral requirement, so it's self-directed movement within those networks, although it is highly recommended that people strike up a primary care physician relationship and maintain that in both of these plans. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Overton, any comments?
Only that I think everyone understands that the county continues to strive to maintain good, solid level of benefit coverage for all of our employees. We recognize that, we are in the competitive marketplace for talent, and, we need to offer a fair wage and a good plan if we're going to be competitive in that marketplace. And we believe this plan here is just that. We think it's ahead of the curve as far as the plan itself. What I mean by that is, frankly, it's still better than most, by far, is what it comes right down to. And I would encourage the board to approve it.
Any commissioner questions? Commissioner Elwell.
So, Mike, to be clear, what you're looking for today is approval from us by way of a vote to enact this for current non-union employees?
Correct, effective January 1 of 18.
Commissioner Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know everybody's probably heard this before, and our administrator has brought this up, and our administrator and the commission here has worked very hard on this. The idea has been to address our budgetary issues, to do everything we can to maintain services in a variety of departments and agencies for everybody in Jackson County, all the residents. And I know our administrator has brought forth different ideas to do that. And so when you look at this, nobody wants to make changes, but certainly from my perspective, this is the best that we can do for our active employees, and also have an opportunity to have additional income to continue to address our other service needs that we have. So I just want to throw that out there.
Commissioner Leitner?
Just for clarification purposes, under this plan, do we avoid the Cadillac tax? Because I know you were talking about it earlier, that our current plans, obviously I'll have it, but with this one, it won't trigger that, right? Or we're like right at
Correct.
the threshold?
Right, if we
Okay.
trend out 3 years at those caps, we are still, during 2020, below the Cadillac tax threshold.
Commissioner Elwell?
Well, to clarify, didn't you also say with our current plan we would avoid that cap or not, or did I understand that
We're
wrong?
tracking, yes, under the self-funded plan, still to be under that cap.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further commissioner comments? Looking for support to the motion to approve the recommended medical plan options providing an HMO and a PPO with HAP Health Allegiance Plan and JHN Jackson Health Alliance and Henry Ford Allegiance for eligible active non-union employees effective January 1, 2018.
So moved.
We have a motion and support? Posting it. The vote should be appearing before you. Motion is passed unanimously with those present. Administrator Overton.
Thank you.
Oh, I do want to make a note to commissioners, you may want to reload your board docs under JC Dot. While not directly related to JC Dot, you've received a long-range plan study from Region 2. It'll be item 6A according to the way Delane's put it on the program, just to make everyone aware of that. Administrator Overton.
Thank you. Good morning, Jim. If you would step up to the podium and introduce our guest, our auditor, for the audit report presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, our next item is the annual presentation of the 2016 annual audit, when you have various documents in board docs, the CAFR itself, the single audit report, Act 51 report, and other correspondence where the auditors set forth some recommendations. Here today, representing Raymond, is Nate Baldwin, the partner on the engagement.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. As Jim said, we have several reports that we issued. The issue date this year was June 30th, so we did meet the state's deadline. Not quite as early as what we had hoped for issuing, but we ran into some delays at the end of the audit, getting some of the other auditors' reports and some other information to be able to issue on time. But we were able to do that and got it done by June 30th.
Was that the MCF audit you were waiting on?
Yeah, that was a medical care facility.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to go over things very briefly in terms of the financial statements. And just kind of explain to you, too, what's coming ahead. The CAFR is a very large document. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But to emphasize, this document is prepared by management, or prepared by, we assist in preparing this document, but it's management's document. The audit report, the only part of the report that's actually ours is towards the beginning of the report. But it's a very small section. It's only 3 pages long. That's technically what's ours. The rest of the information is yours. The audit opinion that was issued this year was an unmodified opinion. That opinion, if you're looking at the report, is on starts on page 11 of the CAFR. But the opinion itself was an unmodified opinion, which is what's considered to be a clean opinion. It's what you're looking for in an audit. Basically, the way I like to sum it up is you can rely on the information that's there. That's what an audit is designed to do, is to get you that assurance that the information in the financial report is accurate and can be relied upon. As we mentioned, the medical care facility, as well as some of the other component units, the EDC is audited by other auditors, and so our report relies on that audit, and we aren't actually performing the audits on those, just include the numbers within your financial statements. Within the report, the general fund, if you're looking at the report, is on page 34. You can see there, that's the income statement for the general fund, and you ended the year at $9.6 million, which is a drop of about $2.2 million for the year. In going through the report, there's lots of different information that's in there. What I like to highlight is some of the information that's the most recent changes in the report. This year, there was a new standard that had to be implemented. I should have marked this before I came in here, page 78, there's a new requirement to disclose tax abatements. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board decided several years ago that not only do you need to report what's happened during the year, what money you've collected, but they need to report what money you haven't collected. And so even if you didn't have the tax abatement agreement, if it was somebody else, the city or whoever, if you had taxes that you didn't receive because of that, that's now required to be disclosed. The numbers weren't big, but it is a new disclosure that was required starting in 2016. Then the other thing that I would point out is on page 92 and 93, you have the schedule of changes in net pension liability. This is a schedule that's considered to be required supplementary information. But this information gives you a look, and eventually you'll have 10 years worth of data because it was just implemented a couple of years ago. This is still relatively new. The data hasn't been built up, but it gives you that history of where that net pension liability is. At the end of 2016, that liability the net pension liability was $60 million. You will also have similar information in the future. On page 95, you can see what the disclosures are under the current standards for other post-employment benefits. But starting, it's actually not next year for you because you don't actually have a other post-employment benefit plan where those amounts are funded. There's a standard that's effective next year if you did have money set aside, but in 2 years, so with your 2018 audit, you will implement new standards related to other post-employment benefits. And just like the pension liability standards require you to put a net pension liability on your full accrual statements, you'll have the same thing with other post-employment benefits in 2 years. So that liability that's sitting out there for unfunded liabilities for the retiree health care will be going on your full accrual statements. That's all I really had on the financial statements on the CAFR itself. We did issue a separate report, and I'm not going to go into that for the retirement system. We issued that report as well for the system itself. And then we issue 3 other separate documents. One is a single audit report. In that, there's 2 different things that we talk about. One is the financial internal controls over the financial statements. There was one issue this year that we reported related to that, related to audit adjustments that had to be made during the audit. And a corrective action plan has been put forth for that, and it is included in the statements. And we kind of broke it down between 2 different, there were some issues with the road fund as well as with the county itself. So those are both in there. On the good side, the other part of that report talks about the federal awards and expenditure of federal awards, and we had no findings on that portion of things. So the compliance with the federal requirements. So that's a good thing with that. The other report that we have that's new this year is several years ago, the legislature wrote a law that required that performance audits be performed for all of the different Act 51 monies that were spent. So cities are now having to have these performance audits as well as road commissions and the Department of Transportation here. So this report is required. I don't think it's accomplishing what they originally intended. It's something where when you originally talked to the people of what they were looking for, well, somebody's not going out and buying a truck when they don't really need that truck, but that's not what the actual requirements are designed to do. It's basically a compliance audit. Did you spend the money in compliance with Act 51? We had no findings related to that. There was additional cost related to it because it does take us additional time to do it, but it was a new requirement. We were going through, it's new. All of our road commissions and road departments within the counties were the first ones to have to implement, so we were working through that. And we continue to work with, the MICPA is working with the Department of Transportation at the state to make sure that we have the proper reports that are coming forward. But it is something that's new, something that's out there, and that we had to issue this year. Yeah.
Did I understand correctly, that was the state legislature is trying to figure out through some report, through an auditor, whether we have bought a truck we should or shouldn't have? I mean,
Yeah,
seriously?
the intent was, are you wasting your money?
They can discern that from Lansing, whether any particular road commission or county is wasting their money on whether they buy a truck.
Whether it's a truck or whether it's they're doing things efficiently. I mean, they were looking at efficiency too, which this isn't designed to do. There were a bunch of things. I'll admit, I think it's one of those, I joke that the new standards for Yellow Book are coming out in the next few years, and they say within that we have a higher standard for reporting waste. And one of the things that we've kind of joked about is, well, this audit itself is kind of a waste. I mean, when you look at how much money all the cities and road commissions and road departments are going to have to spend to have these audits done when they're basically going to be received and filed, and there's really not
Well, I'm
much
all about
accomplishing with them,
accountability
but-
and taking a look at all that stuff, but then I'm thinking, wait a minute. The auditors, no offense, the accountants are trying to figure out whether they need a truck or not? I mean, really? I mean, I don't
Right.
quite get
Well, and we
how
can't do,
that's-
and we can't do that. I mean, it's one of those where it's like, if it complies,
For those legislators in the future or otherwise listening, hey, you really need to take a look at that.
yeah. I do know that I have heard some, because we have a few clients that have actually tried to come down on the side of saying, well, we're not going to pay for this and we're not going to do it. We're recommending that they do it because it is a requirement right now, but I do know that at least on the MML side, I believe MML is working to try to change this requirement or do something different, but it's what it is right now, so.
Commissioner Rice has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on this criteria you're talking about and the state's overreach, has there been other municipalities that you're aware of or that you've worked with where this has actually hurt their audit?
No, I mean, I've had a few where we've come up with a couple of comments, and it's probably more documentation, those types of things, but not necessarily, and more recommendations, but not, somebody's not complying with Act 51. I mean, it's worked out for, I mean, in most places, they're following Act 51. There's, they're not going and spending things on things that don't benefit the roads. I mean, it's, so we're not finding anything, I don't know of anywhere we've actually come up with a finding of non-compliance in our audit.
Commissioner Elwell?
Just to reinforce what Mike said about Lansing doesn't always know best about how to operate things financially, and I think generally MDOT does a good job, but I think back to what MDOT did with the Zilwaukee Bridge, which was have bearings built for the bridge to ride on back in 2011. That cost $2.1 million for bearings, and they made them the wrong size. So I don't think they necessarily always know best about how to spend money.
And I will say on this, when we've had our conversations with MDOT, I mean, they're not thrilled about this thing either, because they know that it's not accomplishing it, but they're having to implement what is in the legislature, what the legislature has put forth into law, so.
Ed, continue.
All right, the only other item that we had was our required communication with those charged with governance. This letter is kind of a standard letter. There are a few comments on there. They don't raise to that level of significant deficiency or material weakness that we had to have it in the single audit, but they're more of recommendations of how things can be improved that, just a notch above what they are. So other than that, I didn't really have anything else I wanted to cover, but.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Elwell?
Just significant findings from prior audits. There were only two issues it looked like, and it seemed like for a number of years there we were making some of the same mistakes year after year, but I don't see that issue this time, and I'm glad to see that, if that's accurate, if you can tell me.
Yeah, the issues that were there last year were both resolved adequately. The items that we had this year were new items for the adjustments, but those should be easily correctable, so.
And I appreciate the hard work by our finance department, too.
Any other questions? Do you need a motion to receive, or will this go on Tuesday night's agenda? What's the pleasure of the commission? We have a motion and support. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Duly carried. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Administrator Overton.
Jim. I think Jim's going to go over this at a high level for us, answer any questions.
What we have before you is a resolution authorizing the sale of up to $68 million of pension obligation bonds. In addition to that, we ask for your approval of the comprehensive financial plan, which has to be submitted to the state. Here today is our consultants who actually did the majority of the report. Kate Blanchett from PFM Financial Advisors is here to go over that just in general and to answer any questions you may have. Just to review this process, the first step was we had to publish a notice of intent to issue the bonds. 45 days had to pass, which it has, and then the next step would be, again, these two steps. First, to authorize the sale of the bonds, and secondly, to approve this comprehensive report, which is submitted to the state. The reason we're asking for this approval here at the study session is that the state takes some time to review the plan, and in most cases requires us to travel to Lansing and answer questions with respect to the plan and so forth. So in order to get this process moving, in order to meet certain deadlines, we felt it was appropriate to ask for your approval at this point. I guess, Kate, if you could just spend a moment on the financial plan as to what's in there and what the purpose of it is, and the remaining steps.
Kate, isn't your name Carrie?
Yes, but I get the Kate thing all the time. I am not the movie
Just
star.
checking. Sorry, Jim. Carrie.
I wish I was, but I'm not. Good morning. We were here in May and went through a lot of what is in the plan, so I'm not, unless you want me to go through it in detail, I will do a higher summary of it. The main difference between what's in this plan and what we went through in May is you had a new actuarial report, which I believe was presented to the board. So the numbers were all updated with the new liability numbers. And also, this plan requires not only for us to go through your pension liability, but it also requires that we discuss the funding of your post-employment health care benefits. So you'll note in going through this that it includes that too. But just the high-level overview, it goes through your legal debt capacity that the county has to issue the debt, which the county has plenty of capacity there. After the issuance of the debt, even assuming at the full not-to-exceed amount, you would have $371 million of capacity remaining for other debt. With the funding on page 3 of the plan, it just breaks down the liability funding between the general county and the Department of Transportation. Debt, again, as Jim indicated, not to exceed amount. And then it goes into the funding where your OPEB is funded. And that, as you know, you do as a pay-as-you-go basis, which is very common for communities throughout the state. I did want to draw your attention, which we did go through in May also, to page 9 is the updated financial analysis showing estimated net present value of savings of $19 million. I should admit that we have built in an interest rate buffer on this, so we would expect in the current market for it to come in at a little bit less than 0.5% lower interest rate than this. So this is a conservative estimate. So if this were sold today, it would be better than this. But this is basically looking at your payments that you would have to make if you didn't do the bonding versus the estimated bond payments. And right now, we have those structured as level annual debt service payments. We have the ability to adjust that based on your desire a little bit. Treasury won't allow us to make any substantial change. It won't allow us to backload all the payments. And then page 10, we went through this chart in May also, but this just shows you your current liability is based on a 7.5% rate of return. So should you earn lower than 7.5% over the remaining however many years, a lot of years, you'll have additional liability. That would be the case whether you bond or not. So right now, your liability is based on your achieving 7.5% rate of return. If you achieve 6.5%, you would have, instead of being 64% funded right now, you'd be 58%.
What page are you on?
Page 10.
Page 10 of the document or page 10 of the PDF?
Probably 11, 11, 12, or 13. I have the document itself.
I understand that.
The actual document, you're right. The page number at the bottom of the document is 10. Okay.
You don't have the slides up on the board, that's why I'm commenting to the general public. Continue, please.
Okay. And if you go to the far left there, if your pension system only earns 5.5%, you would be 52% funded. And then the bottom numbers there show, assuming you sell the pension bonds, you deposit the proceeds of the pension bonds into your pension system. Under those various, it'd be 100% funded at the 7.5%. It would be 90% if you really only earned 6.5%. And if you earn over the remaining life, 5.5%, it'd be 81% funded. So we just like to point that out because, don't think if you proceed with bonding that you will always be 100% funded. Just like if you earn over 7.5%, you may be over 100% funded. But every year, things will change. You'll have a number of retirees that you're paying out. The assumptions will change, so the liability changes. So what the state law provides is that you're allowed to fund the current liability. That's the only thing you're allowed to fund. You're not allowed to go over that liability.
What experience study did you use? The current one that the pension fund uses, or did you use a different one?
the current one is all that we're allowed to use by state law. And we went over in May just the advantages and disadvantages of doing the pension funding. Advantage is getting to, control your cost a little bit more and set your payment schedules for the bond issue. It allows you to become more well-funded, if you will. For the disadvantage, you're changing what some might call a soft cost to a hard cost, because once you issue debt, it is a bond payment. You must make the payment. I would say on the pension side of it, it is a pretty hard cost. If you were looking at doing your post-employment health care, that might be more of a point of contention there. But, pension costs are pretty well protected in Michigan. Your investment rate of returns could be lower than the rate on the bonds. So right now, we're looking at the bond selling at something below, below 5, or let me see, I have it in this page. So it's something below 4%, just below 4%. So if you don't have confidence that over the long period of time, you're going to make more than 4%, then you shouldn't be looking at doing the bonds. And I would say if you're not going to make that amount, you have different investments in that. Jim, I know last time you had a historical average on the pension system.
Yeah, I believe,
7.7%
Yeah.
over the last 30 years.
Right, so it does not eliminate your need for potential additional UALs in the future. Again, if you only earn 6.5% next year or the next 2 years, there'll be a little bit of unfunded liability there. But that would be the case whether you did the bonding or not. Your UAL payment would go up based on what that unfunded amount increased by. And lastly, the last disadvantage is it does use up a little piece of your legal debt capacity.
But that would decrease over the number of years as we pay
Yes.
down also.
Yep.
Or effectively increase our debt capacity.
Right, and the reality is that is a liability. Whether it's a debt, it's still a liability of the counties.
You finished?
Yes.
If I may just summarize a little bit myself, Soren's, from my own understanding at least. We have brought this before the board because we have, frankly, a $3 million deficit operating scheduled for 2018. We look at this as roughly $1 million of that million in our efforts to bring it to zero. Speaking of pros and cons, as you've heard, and I don't want to necessarily reiterate, but I don't see this as a huge risk. Now, maybe I'm being naive, but I don't think so. Historically, we've always outperformed 4% by far, almost double of what we've done the pension plan. We're really just spreading this out over time. If the market were to go, as we've heard some people suggest, the market's going to falter, it doesn't change our liability. We still owe the pension, the folks that are retired, their pension checks, regardless, either way. It is true we have the, as you say, the hard costs, but in all honesty, the pension is, from my perspective, at least it is a hard cost. We can't very well say to them, we're not going to pay you now because we're not doing well on that. For me, this spreads out the burden. It's a cash flow issue, and it spreads out over time. I think I have great confidence that the pension board will continue to perform at least at market, if not better, frankly. And I don't see it as a great risk. Questions?
Commissioner Elwell?
Well, I think just the key percentages to point out, if you go back to that page 10, or bottom of the page there, so the figures are 5.5%, 6.5%, and 7.5%, and it gives you the valuation rates, but the percent that we really have to beat is the 4%, which is what we're paying for the bonds, and that's inclusive of hard costs, correct? So anything above 4%, we're doing better than we would normally do. It'd sure be nice, what'd you say, Jim, 7.7%? I think 30-year average, we'd be more than 100% funded, so, which we're not at now, obviously, so, thank you.
Commissioner questions? I do want to comment on our pension fund. We survived the disaster of 2008 and 9 very, very well, and we've been accumulating value, even with adding retirees to our fund and closing it. The fund itself is in very good shape. I think it would be a fair analysis. The last report we received, we were in the top 20% of counties on investment side of the pension fund. The Board of Trustees of the Pension Board are very studious, spend a lot of time in educational programs, looking at all kinds of alternatives, and spend quite a bit of time studying these documents and going over things. And it's been quite a learning experience for me as the chairman of the retirement board. But we are on sound footing with this, and are looking at some of the different alternatives that are available, again, to insulate the county against any type of continued long-term liability here. So it is, in my belief, one of the better ways for us to solve this problem. We're going to have to pay $6 million, and then $6.5, $7 million, even with the fund doing well. So with the closed fund and the ongoing experience of our employees, you're going to have a cost, and setting it at a fixed number is going to be very beneficial and helpful to the county, in my mind. And we have to pay it no matter what. It's just going to be making sure we do it correctly and as conservatively as possible. Now, the plan is for this to go to the regular committee system? Okay. Administrator Overton.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Yeah, we're asking for approval today,
Okay.
so that the plan can be submitted to the State Department of Treasury.
Yeah, we have to not only submit it, Jim and I are anticipating we'll have to go up and, dare I say, testify before the committee or whomever's looking at it.
Word Docs doesn't like your document. I have to hold on a second. The resolution is not. Correct. We're looking for a resolution to authorize resolution number 091728 for pension bond obligations. We have a motion? We have support?
The other part.
Thank you.
We have to have the other part.
The resolution covers both. Jim?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I voted, said yes to Pier 2. Motion passed. Resolution passed 8-0, unanimous with those present. We've now arrived at JC Dot, item A, Region 2 Planning 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Tanya De Oliveira, and I am a transportation planner with the Region 2 Planning Commission, and I'm here this morning just to present a brief overview of a project that will be kicking off and going for the next year. This is just for informational purposes only this morning. So, just a brief overview of the presentation. So we're going to give you guys a little bit of history and context, the project timeline, and then some components of the public participation. So, as you may be aware, the Jackson Metropolitan Planning Organization, or Jackson MPO, shares the same geographical boundaries as Jackson County. So this area, this plan, is really going to be focusing on the transportation system within the Jackson County area. And so let me give you a little bit of a context of this project I'm talking about this morning. So the previous plan was called the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. And this current plan is a 5-year project update from that 2040 plan. And again, the Region 2 Planning Commission is the one that is responsible for this. So where this comes from is this is a requirement of the federal and state governments. The current federal transportation bill is called Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or FAST Act, and that's where a lot of the guidance is coming from. However, because it's so new, still some of the guidance is still being figured out by some of the folks who do work day to day. And so we also are taking guidance from the previous federal transportation bill, which is called Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, or MAP 21. So those are the two bills that are helping us understand what it is that we actually need to do when we're doing this 2045 long-range transportation plan. And the reason why it's called 2045 is that we need to look 20 years out into the future. So surely we have somewhat of an understanding of what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years, but it's a good idea for us to look broadly and look long range, and that's why we are required to look 20 years out into the future. And in order to not get ahead of ourselves or to accommodate the changing landscape that we live in today, that's why there's an update every 5 years. So the last plan was for looking out to 2040. This plan is looking out to 2045, and then 5 years from now, at least, we'll do another plan update from that. And the impetus, or the important part of this plan is that it ensures opportunities that certain roads in our road system here in the county are eligible for federal aid monies. So there are certain roads that are eligible for that, and they're called federal aid eligible roads. And those roads are where the federal aid money gets to go to. And I'll talk a little bit more about those federal aid eligible roads a little bit later on. So the previous plan, just to kind of give you an overview of the previous plan goals to help you kind of understand some of the things we might be thinking about or covering, is we'll be looking at increased safety and security, increasing accessibility and mobility for all folks who are using the transportation system, maintaining the existing transportation system as opposed to putting in lots of new roads or other things, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, that existing transportation system. We also want to consider, or the previous plan considered, positive impacts and considerations for the community and the natural environment. Also enhanced transportation system integration or connectivity. Again, in the previous plan, we were looking at trying to integrate what's already there and not have a fragmented transportation system. Of course, supporting economic vitality is important, efficiency, and public participation as well. So before I had talked about making sure that the plan points to certain types of roads or projects to be eligible for that federal aid money. And this here is a list of projects that were those federal aid eligible roads that were derived from that previous plan. And then just as an aside as well, the previous plan, the 2040 plan, is available on the Region 2 planning website. So if you're curious about what the new plan will look like, there'll be a lot of similarities between the two. Of course, the information will be updated, but there will be a lot of similarities in terms of components and sections. So just to give you a brief overview, the last plan, these projects, there are some along I-94, West Avenue, Lansing Avenue, et cetera. And the important thing to note about the kind of projects that the Jackson MPO are looking for highlighting in this plan are about capacities or deficiencies. So what roadways are maybe congested or are congested? It's not necessarily about repaving. If we're looking at repaving projects, we do that differently. I just want to kind of set that aside there a minute, but just to help you guys understand, it's the kind of projects that we're looking at for roadways that have traffic. But I'll talk about how we get to that in a little bit. So the 2045 plan, the plan that we're going to be engaging in today, we're going to talk about that for a little bit. Again, we'll be focusing on developing a list of those federal aid eligible roads. And we're talking about the transportation system, even though that road list is what we're talking about is critical to the plan. We want to make sure that we're looking at the entire transportation system, because sometimes if a road is at capacity or close to it, if you can tweak something, maybe add more transit service or add more non-motorized facilities, we might be able to step back from adding lanes to help with that capacity issue. So that's why we look at, in this plan, the entire transportation system. Non-motorized facilities, so biking, walking trails, as well as bike lanes, transit component, the Jackson Area Transportation Authority, or JATA. We look at railroads, airports, freight centers and corridors, so that whole system. And again, we're looking at the existing facilities. We'll be talking about future projects, what issues there may be of the current facilities, as well as looking out into the future, as well as opportunities. So here's a brief overview of the project timeline, as well as the different sections of the plan. So let me just take a little bit of time to walk through this to help you understand what it is. So goals, objectives, and performance measures. As you can tell, we'll be looking at that later this fall. And the reason why we're not doing that right away is that the new federal transportation bill, that FAST Act, the performance measure components is one of those pieces that we're still trying to figure out and get right. And so Region 2 will be working closely with MDOT and, of course, which is the Michigan Department of Transportation, in order to get some good understanding of what those performance measures are, what they look like, how do we actually record them. And as that information is coming down the pipe from them, that's when a little bit later on in the year we'll have a better understanding of what that means and be able to then tighten up the goals, objectives, and performance measures and have those work together. Public participation, that is ongoing. And then just to let the commission know, we had a public kickoff meeting last week for the public to be aware of this project, and it was well attended, as well as some engaging questions by the public members that attended. So that was great for us. We'll talk a little bit more about public transportation in a little bit. Again, the existing conditions, what I talked about is that looking at that transportation system. So right now, through the end of the year, we'll be going out and getting that information, getting the information on existing conditions. So talking to JDOT, talking to the airport, the bus folks, the JATA folks, we'll be talking with them to make sure that we have the right update information for our transportation system here in the Jackson MPO. We'll also be engaging in some modeling, and that, I'll touch on that a little bit later too. Ongoing then into later this fall, we have a course to take a look at the Michigan Department of Transportation's state long-range transportation plan to make sure that the Region 2 plan and the state plan are talking together. That's an important piece. We take a look at the socioeconomic conditions that are here in the county. And then the travel demand forecasting and modeling. So before, when I talked about that project list of where we need to come up with a list of federal aid eligible road projects, where we've got the roads that are maybe at or close to or projected to have capacity issues, adding additional lanes and whatnot. We work closely with folks at MDOT who, that is their job. They take information from modeling, as well as getting some subjective information back from county, township, and city folks within the Jackson MPO to make sure that we have a good understanding of what those projections are. So again, it's about taking that model, getting good information in, good information out, and then taking a look at it to make sure it does fit with what we think is going to be happening in the next 5, 10, 20 years. That's that travel demand forecasting and modeling. And then from that, we get that list of federal aid eligible road projects. And then we talk about those with the different groups. And then we look at operational and management strategies. And then into next year, we then take a look at the transportation system finances. Because this plan needs to be fiscally constrained, we have to have an understanding of what kinds of monies and budgets are we looking at operating in the next 5 to 20 years. And again, 20 years out, hard to say, but 5 to 10, we maybe have a good understanding, or at least we think we know what we are going to be doing with the transportation system. And then the final plan will be reviewed and approved and adopted into the spring and early summer of next year. And I'll talk about the approved and adopted piece as I talk through this public participation piece. But just to take a step back, so this map in front of you is the Jackson MPO, which is, again, the Jackson County boundaries. All those colored roads, those are those federal aid eligible roads. So the projects that we're looking at, being able to take money from the federal government and look at capacity projects, any of the roads that are colored. If they're not colored, then they're not going to be considered. But that's just to say, we're not looking at all the roads across the all the roads across the county, but a good number of them. All right, and then the public participation piece. So as I had said, we had a public meeting last week. It was well attended. We'll have another public meeting towards the end to wrap things up. And if there's public meetings that are needed over the course of the project, happy to have those too. However, the public will also be invited to participate. There will be ongoing updates to the project on our Region 2 Planning Commission website. And that's to say, when we put together sections or chapters that are going to be available for the plan, right? That's what the plan is made up of. The different sections and chapters will be available online over the course of the project and available to review. We're not going to have the whole project just available at the very end. That's not going to be useful or timely for anybody. It doesn't give people an opportunity to look through things, to think through them, and give us timely feedback. They'll be available on that website. So a couple different ways there where anybody can participate in the planning process. We also put together a steering committee. Folks from JCDOT, the county, or the city, Department of Aging, and if I didn't get that right, excuse me, I've just started here, but been working for about 4 months, so I'm still trying to get the names right. Also from the Region 2 Planning Commission, the Jackson Area Technical Comprehensive Study, or JAX, folks from there on there as well, Disability Connections, the Walkable Communities Coalition, and there's probably 1 or 2 others, but that's the steering committee. They're meeting they're meeting over the course of the project to provide feedback, and they're going to give a good review of the project as well. The JAX and the Region 2 Planning Commission are going to give input along the way as well, and the Region 2 Planning Commission is the actual body that will approve and adopt the plan. We'll also have some consultation with the state, regional, and local agencies. And then anybody that wants to be on a mailing list to also kind of have a personal invitation, they're welcome as well. So that's the public participation piece. And as I said, this project will be ongoing over the course of the year. If it's the pleasure of the County Board of Commissioners, I'm happy to provide an update over the course of the plan or at the end before it's adopted. But I just want to provide an opportunity to let you guys know, as well as take any questions or comments. And that's all at this time. Thank you.
Commissioners? Commissioner Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, Tanya, I just really appreciate the fact that you have, in a very short period of time, you've taken on quite a lot of responsibility. I'm not here to embarrass you, but obviously being involved in the Region 2 Planning Commission along with the chairman and Commissioner Placzek, you obviously are learning quickly, and your presentation was done quite thoroughly, but actually in a very relatively short amount of time, which certainly we appreciate too. So, and I also appreciate the mailings and the updates and everything. And so I just want to say, again, for those who don't know you, we should appreciate the fact that we're getting some good young people in some of our departments, even though Region 2 Planning Commission is not part of us, but you guys certainly work with us. So thank you.
Any further commissioner comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking, formulating words, letting them percolate up. As most of you have heard me speak, I'm an advocate. I read a lot of different things in regard to technology, and you know where I'm going to ask is, where is this plan? Does it address or take into consideration the driverless vehicles that are coming and will change? In fact, personally, I predict a huge paradigm shift in how we drive and how we go from A to B. And I know the state is spending tens of millions out at Willow Run on this whole thing. They've already changed the state laws to allow for driverless cars, but I didn't hear any mention of it here. So does the state, have they provided any guidance? I assume someone's planning and looking at, I assume they already have, they just didn't ask me, but to participate on what that impact will be on our roads, on our public transportation, on everything.
Great question, and this is the time to raise issues like that. So the answer for you right now is we don't know, and that's a part of what we're doing this plan for, is to figure out how things like automated and connected vehicles, drones, how does that fit into the transportation landscape? And so we're going to be researching, understanding what the latest projections are, trends are, issues are, to figure out, does this necessarily, is this something that's going to be accounted for in our modeling, or do we need to address this some other way in terms of a policy or a goal or a narrative or something within this plan? So we're going to be working on it over the course of the next year, trying to figure out how the new technology components and issues are going to, can influence and will be influencing the transportation system. So hopefully by the end of this process, we'll have a better answer for you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
JC Dot. Audit report presentation. And go right into your resolution of authorization.
Morning, Commissioners. So to be clear, we're on the 6B, correct?
Correct.
The installment purchase agreement?
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay, wonderful. You may recall we approved a purchase of some plow trucks in our ongoing 10-year capital improvement plan to improve our fleet at JC Dot. And part of that motion included a provision that would authorize a lease-to-purchase agreement. So thinking back to my days as a runner in track, passing the baton, we were waiting for the perfect time and meanwhile doing some research to pass that baton. So the chassis build is the first lap, so to speak, and then we pass the baton and the trucks go on for the body builds, which is happening right now with these 14 trucks. And that happens to be the perfect time to do the IPA and or the lease to purchase agreement. So our bond counsel has given us a proposal, basically an idea that we hadn't considered early on, and it's something that we as a county department qualify for, but as a road commission we would not have. So it's an innovative way to purchase trucks that is commonly used by counties, but not by road commissions. So I guess one more advantage of being a county department is before us, and this could save us about $200,000 based on the drop in interest rates that we expect. Happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Elwell.
Chris, that allowance for the county to do that versus road commissions, that's not impacted at all by the MTF funds that pay for the road department?
No, you're asking if there's some other restrictions in there?
Yeah, exactly.
No, we haven't uncovered any. They fully vetted the legal requirements, and we can use and will use the MTF funds to pay the, actually most of this will be MDOT revenues through our contract, because we put the new trucks in service with the state crews. So we will supplement, of course, with MTF funds as needed.
And it may be just a minutia of it for me, but so ownership of the vehicles, they'll be titled to Jackson County, or is it JC Dot that they get title to?
JC Dot is not a legal entity, so all of our vehicles are now titled as Jackson County-owned vehicles. Another nuance here is as a lease to purchase, it's, technically the manufacturer is the owner, which creates some issues from time to time. With this provision, it's immediately titled to the county. The banks love it because they don't have to worry about, the issue of taking back ownership should something happen, a future board decide they just wanted to end the lease to purchase arrangement. So we would own the trucks outright, and that has advantages in our interest rate calculation because there's minimal risk for the financial institutions. Another key advantage to this method is banks understand it. It's common. It's clearly written. I'm very impressed with the language that our financial advisors and bond counsel put together here. So there's nothing in here that's foreign or scary to the financial institutions, unlike the lease to purchase, which is a little concerning to our local banks and institutions here in Jackson County. It's something they don't see every day, but this they see quite often. So it's very common to them. The timing is tricky, if I could just comment on that. You basically get, by industry standards, a 24-hour turnaround. They quote the interest rates based on what they see in the market, and they want closure within 24 hours. So given, we're looking to get committee approval and blessing, and then the meeting is on the 19th. So we'll open the bids. We've timed it to open them on the 19th. We'll email you out the results so that hopefully you can just pass and approve the resolution in the evening, and then we'll handle the execution the next day by who you delegate, presumably Chairman Shotwell, to sign the documents on the 20th.
Any further commissioner questions? So I understand correctly, you're asking for today permission to purchase?
This is just for discussion purposes. It'll go
Okay.
through the normal bid cycle. We wanted to give you time to digest it, ask any questions in the next week or so, and want to make sure we're just ready on the 19th.
Any further commissioner questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Go to the next item.
You bet. Item 6C is, this is something I'm requesting action. Time is of the essence. We have a failed culvert on Berry Road, a primary road here in the county, and we finally received our DEQ permit in late June, so our staff immediately got to work on putting together the bid documents once we knew the size of the culvert that they approved. And we received those bids, which are attached, and you'll see 5 results ranging from $75,000 to $136,000, with 4 of those between $75,000 and $84,000. We are recommending award to Mead Brothers at a cost of $75,261.85. And this involves removal of a 36 diameter culvert, 36-inch diameter culvert, CMP, corrugated metal pipe, and installation of a new precast box, which is a 9-foot span, very wide, and only 3 foot tall, kind of squatty. And DEQ requires that for hydraulics and for environmental reasons. It's 56 feet long, and being a precast concrete box, it'll take a couple months to build, and our hope and plan was to get this installed yet this year, before November 15th. So that's why we're coming before you today, because we have learned that suppliers are extremely busy and backlogged, and the contractor cannot order construction of the box until they get the blessing and the award of the contract. So if you can award this today, we can give them that notice of award and get the box underway.
Commissioner Elwell?
Chris, we've used Mead Brothers before, satisfactory work.
Yes.
Okay.
Performed very well.
I'd so move the request.
You have a motion and support. Any commissioner questions to the motion? Commissioner Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed there on the bids that you had wrote down there, the scope of work is generally the same for everyone as far as the bids?
Yes,
So the lowest one is the same scope of work that you need?
correct.
Right, thanks.
We do vet that out carefully, and you'll see in the RFP documents, I'm very happy with our team's development of these. It's very well scoped, very professional package that we now put out, and so we do make sure it's apples to apples across the board. So you might be asking, well, what's that high bid about? Contractors bid as they see it. They may be busy, just threw one in. We don't know. Yep.
Go ahead. Does anyone else have any questions? Eight zero. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you. Really appreciate you expediting some of these construction projects. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Administrator Elwell? Overton?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Mike, thank you for the opportunity to present the draft plan we've been working on at the Health Department for strategic planning purposes. I've got a short presentation, which is really a high-level overview and summary, if you will, of the content of the plan. And so I thought we would walk through that.
And the first words you're supposed to say are, we discussed, remember we rehearsed? It's consistent with the county's...
It's consistent with the county's strategic plan, yes. Which you will see. Okay. Thank you, Mike. So in March of this year, the board approved entering into a $10,000 contract agreement with MPHI. The purpose was to improve our readiness at the Health Department to apply for national accreditation through the National Public Health Accreditation Board. And the funding was used to complete a FAB-required strategic plan, which is a requirement for national accreditation. We used a consultant to conduct and analyze a pre-planning electronic survey, which was completed by virtually all our health department staff, Board of Commissioners, department heads in the county, and the health department community partners in the community. We had a total of 87 surveys completed, and additional survey input can be obtained and incorporated as we prefer on a larger community basis. And of course, we did the traditional strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis that was completed. So in terms of documentary review, this is kind of the list of everything that we looked at with the consultant in terms of preparing the strategic plan. So our annual report, the Health Department, our existing mission, vision, and values were reviewed. The HIO Community Health Needs Assessment and Health Action Plan were also reviewed. We have a county work team summary, both one internal and also county-wide, that we look at in terms of our staff participation across the organizational structure. Our customer satisfaction survey summaries, which are done on a quarterly basis. Our high-performance organization summary, which we do a lot of work on at the Health Department. The county strategic plan. And also, we did a QI self-assessment tool summary report last year. So all these help to inform what we should consider placing in the strategic plan. So the plan reflects how the Health Department will move forward with a wide array of community partners to maximize our performance as a public health organization of excellence. Our ultimate goal is really to assure the delivery of public health services that address the community's health needs, improving health status of our community. It includes our mission, a revised vision, value, and cultural statements. The mission is basically unchanged. The values and vision were slightly changed, and the cultural statement was added. So the values incorporate a focus on health equity, which we've always kind of had a health focus, but we added in the word equity, if you will, to this, because it's very much a current effort, if you will, at the national and state level. The vision was changed from to be Michigan's healthiest community to be one of Michigan's healthiest communities. I think that staff felt we probably were being maybe a little bit overly optimistic with the first statement, and to be one of Michigan's healthiest communities simply made a lot more sense to the staff, and we decided to go that direction. I think if we were in the 10 or the top 20%, we'd be very happy with that. The administrative team at the Health Department will oversee implementation, monitoring, and revision of the strategic plan. We'll be sharing progress, barriers, successes with staff, stakeholders, and constituents. The plan has 6 priority areas. Integration of public health services with the healthcare system in Jackson County, which we've been doing a lot of already, but it continues in the plan. Identification and mitigation of emerging public health issues. If you remember all the work we did last year with the potential threat of Ebola, that's a good example of an emerging public health issue. We want to make sure that we're prepared and have a lot of communication in place to do that. The creation of agency-wide system plans. This is primarily performance management, workforce development, and quality improvement. Improvements in agency infrastructure to promote public health practices and increase credibility of service delivery. Advancement of advocacy strategies at local, state, and federal levels of government, and sustain and build strong collaborative partnerships. Some of the details. These are 12 objectives in the plan, and these fit within the priority areas, if you will, that we've identified. So assuring the facility is clean, safe, and provides a positive atmosphere for both the public and the staff. We have some internal improvements within the structure that we'd like to do. Procuring and installing required software, hardware for the support of remote network access. We're trying to get more mobile, both with our nursing staff and our environmental health staff. Implementing evidence-based approaches to address the gaps in population health and initiating outreach to collaboratively meet the needs. Expanding access to public health services in the community with an emphasis on addressing the social determinants of health and community health improvement plan priorities. We've done a lot of work with the state innovation model. I'm sure that's probably going to continue for the next at least 2 years. The next slide talks about improving the knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors of residents of Jackson County. And this is where we have made a very deliberate effort to incorporate the county strategic plan elements of the Healthy Communities section of the plan. So everything in the plan that we have a co-chair, chairing, leadership, or championing role within the county strategic plan is incorporated in this strategic plan. We'd offer educational outreach and partnership opportunities to local organizations such as county government departments, schools, transportation, faith-based organizations, civic groups, and healthcare systems and providers. And we do want to create a program performance management system and a quality improvement plan. Implement a community partner recognition and appreciation program. Develop and implement a workforce development and retention plan, a coordinated communication system to alert and inform everybody about emerging health issues, effective communication methods with local, state, and federal officials, and provide training and opportunities for staff to engage with policymakers on an annual basis. There's a difference between advocacy and lobbying, and we definitely want to make sure our staff know what the difference is, so that at least involves some annual training and refresher for our staff. There are 53 potential strategies identified that we consider to be the most meaningful and impactful way to improve the department and support community health improvement efforts. Many staff and other teams will prioritize and champion the strategies within the objectives. We still have some metric and measure work to do to develop, and it is cross-referenced with the essential public health services and the FAB domains with each strategy, and those are defined on page 21 and 22 of the plan itself. So that's a very high-level overview. I didn't try to go into all the detail that's possible in the strategies. I wanted to make this as simple and efficient as possible. So my purpose of coming, obviously, today for your study session was to review this with you and get any comments and feedback you might have for us before we want to move this to a final plan.
Any questions? Doctor?
Hi.
Morning.
When I read through a lot of this last night, you talked about the communications in the healthcare system currently in the county, the EPIC system, and so on. Have you come up with any numbers or expenditures that you're going to need to purchase that computer and that software and those licensing agreements?
Well, if you're speaking specifically about the electronic medical record,
It's EPIC, yes.
our costs for that are actually a little bit less than they were for NextGen when we were subscribing to that EMR. So no additional costs will be required for that piece of working with the electronic medical record system and being able to communicate with healthcare providers through that. I don't see any problem there. We already have that in place. Where we will have to do some cost estimating and assessing software and hardware requirements is when we try to go more mobile in the field. And that is really one of the other objectives that we identified. There will be some costs associated with that. And we'll have to work with IT department to figure that out. And we don't necessarily have the resources right now in hand to do it, But part of the process will be looking at how we generate resources to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Administrator Overton.
This next item is our fee schedule. Just to be clear, what we're thinking here, first of all, this fee schedule, there are no recommended changes to increase or decrease the fees. But we do believe that it's important that the board see what the fees are. However, frankly, I think it would be just as easy in the future just to add this into the budget itself, so it's always in the budget. Anyone can see it, and with that way, if there's changes, we'll just highlight them in there, and of course, they would be approved along with the budget at that time. If as long as no one objects to that, I think that's what we'll do in the future. You'll just see it as part of the budget process. But for this one here, we did bring it forward, on its own, and we'd run it through the process. Yes, sir.
When was the last time we increased fees?
Well, I think, we can't say it that way. It's, pardon me? It is, it's by department. We always ask the departments, do you have a fee change, be it an increase or decrease? Because legally, the fees, to avoid BOLT, meaning tax challenge, the fee needs to be closely aligned with the cost of providing the service. So that's why we like to look at them manually. We talk to our department heads and say, hey, take a look at your fees. Are you in line? That sort of thing. And it's not that a board cannot subsidize a particular activity. They can, meaning they can charge less, a fee less than, as long as they, have a good cause or good reason, or frankly, actually, it's the board. They can do it for any reason, but.
Well, my fear with that is that if somebody looks at it and they say, and I'm just going to pick anything, we can do that for $15. And so we charge $15. But in reality, if they're not looking at it carefully enough, it could be $22 that it's costing us. And so I just want to make sure. And then
That's why we review it annually, yes.
Okay, and then when you raise the fees, you want to make sure that you don't wait too long, because then it looks like a big jump.
Again, I totally agree. That's why I always encourage everyone, take a look at your fees annually. You do not want to wait 10 years and then raise a fee, because you're doubling it and people rightfully become very concerned.
If commissioners read through this document and find areas that for some reason have been missed, should we notify the administration?
By all means, yeah, clearly, because
I don't see anything for rental of the Jackson County Fairgrounds at all on this document, and I know it went through the reevaluation when the Parks rewrote its policy.
darn, it should be in there. They really should all be in there. We've sent notices to all the elected officials, everyone, and I'm a little embarrassed that it's the parks that it's not in there.
Parks are in there.
The fair is not in there, which is like part of the parks. Okay, thank you. We'll make sure that gets added in.
Thank you. You need this voted on, sir?
Hang on there.
Yes, Deborah?
Sorry, if I may, some of them were intentionally left out. If they're statutory, such as the courts, those were intentionally left out. So, and I believe I indicated that in the staff report.
Understood that. I know that the Gumpert Building now has seen a lot more activity, and I don't see any of the fairground properties noted on here as possible rental, or what it costs to put stuff indoors all winter and everything like that.
Yeah,
as a fee structure.
Yeah, to be frank, I think that the reason that's not in here is because it's up to the Fair Board. We've left it to the Fair Board to.
Well, you've left it to the Parks Board, but the Parks Board's in here.
Touche.
Do you want to vote on this or not?
No, we can take it to.
Thank you. Administrator Overton. Sure? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion in accordance with MCL 15268 to go into closed session to discuss a legal opinion.
Support.
We have a motion and support. May I have a roll call vote, please? Sure. I believe we can post it and tally it, can't we? Sure.
One down there.
Motion, yep. Yes. Those opposed? Motion duly carried. On the date Tuesday, September 5th, 2017, the Jackson County Board of Commissioners entertain a resolution to approve 09-17.29, notice to raise additional funds under the Jackson County Wastewater Disposal Facility, Southern Regional Interceptor Section, bond contract, and Act 185 of the Public Act of Michigan of 1957 as amended. Do you want me to read through the whole resolution? Entertain that motion, please. We have a motion. Do I have support? Support. We have a motion and support. Commissioners. Commissioner Leitner.
I'm going to vote in favor of this motion for this resolution. I don't feel like there's really any good options, but obviously with litigation that's went on for years and years and years, the judge has finally made an order of steps that we have to take to resolve this issue going forward. And I just feel like this is in the best interest for those that are going to be affected to. This is the best option we have. And this is really the only, I mean, one of the few, but this is the only feasible option, I think, that is the least offensive to each of the townships. So I just want to say that in voting for this right now.
Any other commissioners? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you post the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Resolution's passed 7-1. Administrator Overton, is there any other items to come before this group? We return to public comment. Seeing no public comment, commissioner comments. Seeing no commissioner comments,